At the northernmost edge of the Apostle Islands, surrounded by the vast waters of Lake Superior, lies Devil's Island, a place of stunning natural beauty and haunting history. Known for its striking sea caves and treacherous waters, this island has been the site of shipwrecks, mysterious legends, and stories that blend human struggle with the forces of nature. So, why has this remote island played such a significant role in the history of Lake Superior? What secrets are hidden within its cliffs? And how has its reputation of both danger and refuge shaped its legacy? Stay tuned to find out, as today we discover the fascinating story of Devil's Island. I'm your host Ryan Sokash, and you're watching It's History. To understand Devil's Island and its role within the greater Apostle Islands, we need to turn back the hands of time over 1 billion years. Back then, the region where the island now stands was a vast plain traversed by streams and rivers that deposited large amounts of sediment into the terrain. Over time, this sediment compressed to form the sandstone that make up the archipelago's geological foundation, also known as the Bayfield Group. Anyhow, this is what's responsible for those unique formations found around Devil's Island, as the softer, porous sandstone was susceptible to erosion. And if we fast forward in the timeline a bit to the last glaciation around 12,000 years ago, the superior ice lobe covered the entire region. As the ice retreated, it left behind sediment, rocks, and meltwater that shaped the geography of what is now Lake Superior and its islands. The glacial retreat not only defined the general shape of the islands, but also left evidence of the ancient water levels in the form of elevated terraces and beaches, marking changes in the lake's level over thousands of years. On the walls of the caves, rolling lines can be seen, similar to the marks left by the water on the sand as it receded, and tell a similar story to the erosion found on the beach. These formations tell the story of waves and currents from 1 billion years ago, and perhaps are the only thing that remained the same as the landscape changed around them. One of the major indigenous cultures of the Great Lakes, the Ojibwe, began to inhabit the Apostle Islands seasonally. They were drawn by their abundant natural resources, as well as the protection offered by the caves. With their fish-rich waters and forests, these islands became strategic points for fishing, hunting, and gathering. Although they were not permanently inhabited due to the harsh winters, each island held a specific purpose in the lives of these natives. Some were used as temporary camps, others as places for gathering wild berries, but some of the islands, like Devil's Island, took on a much deeper spiritual significance. Now, this spiritual connection between the natives and Devil's Island is not exactly surprising. To them, the natural world was filled with symbolic and spiritual meanings. The eerie sounds produced by the island's caves when the wind blew through their passages were not merely a natural phenomenon. They were interpreted as the voices of spirits inhabiting the place. This perception reinforced the idea of the island as a sacred site, a meeting point between the physical and spiritual worlds. Overall, the natives' worldview was deeply tied to natural cycles and geography. They believed every element of the environment had a purpose and spirit, and this notion gave the island's unique formations a significance beyond the tangible. Although there are no written records of how the natives specifically interacted with Devil's Island, its spiritual importance can be inferred from their oral traditions and practices in similar areas. For instance, they used isolated places, particularly those surrounded by water, for purification ceremonies and spiritual communion, symbolizing a barrier between the human and spiritual world. In this context, Devil's Island may have been seen as a place of intense energy where natural and spiritual forces converged. However, around the arrival of our European forefathers, a change was on the horizon. The 17th century marked a turning point in the history of the Great Lakes region. Early European explorers, primarily French, arrived at Lake Superior to expand trade routes and access resources. Among these pioneers was Samuel de Champlain, who in 1615 created the first maps of the region, followed by other notable figures, who established trading posts west of the lake during the 1730s. The Europeans learned to adapt to the environment by collaborating with the natives, who offered crucial knowledge about Lake Superior's routes and strategic points. And it needs to be noted here that with their geographic prominence, islands like Devil's Island were identified as natural navigation markers and potential sites for establishing safe trade routes in what was otherwise a very challenging lake environment. I'd also add that these explorers did not arrive alone. In fact, their arrival marked the beginning of a new economy in the region, the fur trade. French and British merchants quickly recognized the immense value of the area's natural resources, particularly beaver pelts, for producing things like hats and other luxury clothing. For the natives, trade with Europeans brought tangible benefits at first, since in exchange for things like furs, they received goods that transformed their daily lives. Metal tools, such as knives and axes, facilitated hunting and gathering activities in a much more efficient way than previously possible, while firearms improved their chances of survival and defense in a competitive environment. European fabrics, lighter and more practical than traditional animal hides, also began to replace some of their clothing elements. However, this exchange was not without tension and negative consequences. On one hand, the growing demand for furs led to the intensive exploitation of natural resources, disrupting the ecological balance on which the natives depended. To elaborate, constant contact with Europeans sparked conflicts over the control of territories and strategic trade routes, often resulting in clashes between tribes allied with different colonial powers. Though the most devastating impact was the introduction of diseases, such as smallpox and measles, since the natives had no immunity. These epidemics decimated communities, weakening their social and cultural structures at the time when they were already facing significant external pressure. Hence, what initially seemed like a mutually beneficial relationship transformed into something far more ugly. However, it was also in this context of exploration and trade that Devil's Island found its significance as a strategic point. Its location on the northernmost tip of the Apostle Islands made it a natural marker for navigators venturing across Lake Superior. However, the characteristics that made it stand out as a visual reference also made it a considerable hazard for ships. Lake Superior, known for its unpredictable storms and strong currents, was already a very challenging route. And when you add to that the fact that the waters around Devil's Island were particularly treacherous due to submerged rock formations, passing through the region on ship was very risky. Additionally, storms could form within hours, and visibility was often reduced due to fog, a common phenomenon on Lake Superior. Vessels of the time, generally small and ill-equipped to handle the lake's extreme conditions, faced major risk when they approached the island. Records of shipwrecks in the area increased during this period, as the piles of wrecks on the lake bed illustrated the sailors' difficulty. However, when the visibility and conditions were good, the island served as a reference point to avoid disaster and played an important role in the trade routes connecting European trading posts with settlements further south. From the Apostle Islands, ships carried furs and other goods to Sumerim, a vital crossing point to the other Great Lakes and routes all the way to Europe. And it was in this sense that Devil's Island held a key position in the trade network that connected cultures and continents. By the late 19th century, the Industrial Revolution had radically transformed the economic landscape of North America, and Lake Superior was no exception. In 1855, the first canal opened at Sumerim, connecting Superior to the rest of the Great Lakes and leading to an exponential increase in maritime traffic. Resources such as iron, copper, coal, and timber extracted from nearby regions crossed here, and in no time, the area became the backbone of the industrial economy. The size and number of ships that crossed these waters also grew significantly. Large steel vessels designed to transport thousands of tons of goods replaced the small wooden boats traditionally used in the fur trade. However, this growth proportionally increased the risks that we mentioned earlier. Historical records indicate that in the decades following the opening of this canal, the waters around Devil's Island served as a site for numerous major shipwrecks. These accidents resulted in human and economic losses and increased pressure on the authorities to ensure the safety of these critical routes. To address the risks of maritime transportation in the region, a lighthouse on Devil's Island became an urgent necessity. And so it was. In 1891, the US government authorized its construction. Choosing Devil's Island was no coincidence. Its location at the northernmost point of the Apostle Islands made it ideal for guiding ships, The lighthouse's initial design consisted of a wooden structure with a third-order Fresnel lens. This technology, developed in France, was among the most advanced of its time, and allowed the lighthouse to be seen over long distances, even in foggy or stormy conditions. However, the extreme climate and environmental demands quickly proved that the original structure could not withstand Lake Superior's harsh conditions. So by 1901, that original wooden tower was replaced by a far more durable cast iron structure. This new 22-meter high tower improved the lighthouse's durability and extended its range, providing excellent safety for ships transiting the area. Complementary facilities, including a keeper's house and a fog signal system, were added, which were crucial for this operation. A small infrastructure network was also built on the island to facilitate the lighthouse's operations and maintenance. This included a tramway powered by a steam engine to transport materials from the dock to the tower, and it proved to be an essential innovation for its time. This island now hosted housing for the lighthouse keeper, an oil storage deposit, a pump station for fresh water, as well as its own little railroad. The lighthouse solved a practical purpose, but its construction also symbolized the U.S.'s ability to protect its inland maritime trade. This was a turning point in the navigation possibilities on Lake Superior, but the operations depended on the constant work of lighthouse keepers. These keepers faced a demanding routine and worked in extreme isolation. They lit the beacon at dusk, kept the lens clean, and ensured that the fog signal worked during frequent periods of low visibility. Sub-zero temperatures and ice blocked the island during the winter, making it impossible to receive supplies or assistance. Even in the summertime, storms could cut off communication completely for days. Yet, the keepers were also responsible for repairing damaged equipment, maintaining the tram system, and storing the oil needed for the light. Their tasks required precision, as any mistake could cost lives on the lake so infamous for shipwrecks. Despite these challenges, it should be emphasized that the lighthouse keepers performed multiple heroic acts, saving many sailors' lives. Since its inauguration, the lighthouse brought about a major reduction in accidents. Not only did it offer immense safety, but it facilitated the growth of more regular trade routes. And with that, the waters around Devil's Island were no longer viewed solely as a hazard, but became a part of a strategic maritime corridor connecting Lake Superior's port to the markets further south. This shift was crucial during the Industrial Revolution, when the demand for efficient transportation of raw materials such as iron and timber peaked. Although later technological innovations like radar made traditional lighthouses less indispensable, the Devil's Island Lighthouse remained operational all the way up until 1978, when it was automated. Though it should be emphasized here that despite this new layer of protection, the waters around Devil's Island remained marked by shipwrecks, each with their tragic stories that fed to the island's mystical allure. Tales of past storms, the howling wind through the caves, and the unexpected lights reported by sailors brought about a reputation beyond the island's natural beauty. In other words, Devil's Island became a hotbed for urban legend and folklore. Let me explain. Over the centuries, the water around Devil's Island had witnessed many tragedies. One of the most notable shipwrecks was the SS Pretoria in September of 1905. This sail and steam vessel, one of the largest wooden ships ever built, was transporting iron and timber when an unexpected storm struck the entire region. The massive waves and hurricane-force winds broke the ship's hull, leaving the crew to desperately fight for their survival. While some managed to reach the shore, the shipwreck claimed several lives, and this wreck has been at the bottom of the lake ever since. Believe it or not, yet another shipwreck happened in that exact same storm. I'm referring to the SS Savona. This freighter ran aground on a sandbar near Sand Island, south of Devil's Island. While part of the crew escaped in lifeboats, the violent waves and freezing temperatures led to the death of 7 sailors. Though the treacherous waters around the island didn't only claim large vessels. Numerous incidences involving smaller vessels were recorded. They were dragged towards submerged rocks by strong currents or caught in the fog. While many wrecks were attributed to human error or extreme weather conditions, some survivors spoke of strange phenomena that bolstered the island's legend. You see, the name Devil's Island is tied to physical danger in the stories we previously mentioned, but there are also some very common stories among fishermen and sailors of the supernatural. One of the most famous and reoccurring stories is that of the Crying Caves. The story goes, during storms, the wind rushes through the marine formations and creates a very unsettling sound, often described as howls or human cries. While science explains this phenomenon as the result of natural acoustics, local cultures, especially the Native Americans, interpreted this as voices of trapped spirits, reinforcing the island's mystical reputation. Another popular legend is that of the phantom lights, reported by some modern sailors near the island's coast. These lights, which seem to hover over the water, have been interpreted by some as supernatural signals from sailors who lost their lives in shipwrecks. Other accounts describe shadowy figures that emerge from the caves, but then disappear as fast as they materialized. So suffice it to say that tragedies left their mark, as did the stories of heroism and the profound respect for nature, shaping the perspective of generations of sailors and explorers. With the technological advancements happening in the second half of the 20th century, the need for a lighthouse on Devil's Island began to diminish. As I mentioned previously, the lighting system was automated in 1978, eliminating the need for keepers to live on the island ever since. With this transition, the keepers' quarters were left vacant and fell into a temporary state of disarray since there was no one around to perform any level of maintenance. Though the departure of the last keeper did not mark the end of the island's significance, but rather the beginning of a new chapter. In the 1970s, Devil's Island was incorporated into the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore, a decision that protected the lighthouse as a historical monument and the fragile ecosystem surrounding it. This inclusion ensured the conservation of the sea caves, the lighthouse, and the remains of the infrastructure that once made this operation possible. Protecting Devil's Island with the national park status reflects its value as one of Lake Superior's most important national treasures. Its sea caves, carved by millions of years of erosion, are one of a kind. These sandstone formations are visually stunning, with red and golden hues that shift with the sunlight. They also serve as refuge for various species of seabirds and small mammals that inhabit the cracks in the cliffs. Preserving this environment is crucial, as it represents one of the most fragile and dynamic ecosystems found within the Great Lakes. In addition to its ecological value, the island also holds a great cultural significance. The lighthouse and its surrounding infrastructure, including the tramway system and the keeper's residence, tell a story of a time when survival in this remote region depended on human ingenuity to adapt to nature's forces. Many of these elements have been restored, becoming educational attractions for visitors and serving as a reminder of Lake Superior's maritime past. Furthermore, incorporating the island into the national park also facilitated the investigation and documentation of historical interactions between the island's indigenous inhabitants, European explorers, and the natural environment. Today, Devil's Island attracts thousands of visitors annually, captivated by its history and landscape. One of the most popular activities here is kayaking, which allows adventurers to explore the sea caves rather close up. In the winter, the same caves transform into stunning ice formations, drawing photographers and hikers from around the globe. Meanwhile, the lighthouse remains a central feature of the National Park Service's guided tours. Visitors can tour the original facilities and learn about the lighthouse's operations, the challenges faced by the keepers, as well as the folklore surrounding this magnificent island. We'll leave it there for today, but a special thank you to our Patreon supporters for making this episode possible. There's already 3 of you guys, and I'm so honored by that. Hopefully, a few more people will click here to join our community right now. Actually, we don't need that many supporters, and every little bit makes a huge difference. After all, I have to finance my tea drinking habits, so I don't lose my voice. Until next time, guys, I'm Ryan Sokash, signing off.